wired in.
Sorry?
He's wired in.
Is he?
Yes.
How about now? You're still wired in?
Welcome to episode 201. This is the Out of Bounds podcast. My name is Adam Jabber, and we have a fantastic episode for you today. One of my favorites of the year. Mr. Lachy McKillop is on the show, a.k.a. Spin That Up, a.k.a. Lachy, a.k.a. one of the better suspension techs out in the universe. He was in charge of STU, which is SRAM Technical University for Australia. He was a World Cup tech. The dude he raced a bit. The dude is a monster, and he is super funny. And we have a really good conversation about bikes, bike culture, shitty bikes, good bikes, dialing in suspension, how you can do that, kind of the thought process between like why he wanted to start this thing called Squishy Bits, where he talks about suspension and kind of gets really technical. He also has like a one-on-one suspension service. He does YouTube videos now where he kind of goes through different things like setting up your axis components. So if you want a channel to go to for the technical aspects of things, go to Spin That Up. His Instagram is Spin That Up as well. Dude, this was such a fun episode because it was one of those where I just got to shoot the shit with somebody that like actually gets it, like that worked in a shop, kind of gets the day-to-day, but also is at a very high level. So shout out to Lachy. I wasn't sure what this one was going to be like because I kind of just reached out to him out of the blue without knowing him at all, but the dude's a G, and I am thrilled. Sorry if I look pale. I was running, and running is terrible and sucks, and I'm bad at it. Before we get into the episode, we have some partners for today that we'd like to talk about, and first is Rumple. Rumple makes the original puffy blanket, as you can see on the screen if you're watching the YouTubes. They make an awesome product. They make everything from my favorite towel in the entire world. It literally lives in my car and in my gym bag for when I find that random river when I'm driving up in Vermont. That I can just go jump in for when I go to the gym and I'm disgusting. It's just a good towel. It's a good packed towel to just have on you at all times. Puffy blanket is awesome. They have all kinds of stuff. Just go check out rumple.com, and they're having 25% off sale. So you can save 25% off. Normally our code gets you 15 off, but 25% off starting this Friday, running until the end of May. So go to rumple.com and get yourself something. I mean, even if you just go and get like the beer, what are they called, Ethan? Beer blankets? Pull it up. Ah! Gear. Beer blankets. I told you they're called beer blankets. You can get beer blankets. They're actually really funny and they're really cool, and obviously reuse them. They're not like your shitty everyday koozie. I'm a big fan. So they sell them in 6-packs too. So you can go get those on Rumple's website at 25% off for the end of the month of May. We also have a giveaway on Friday on the Instagram page. So hit that up if you're interested. Puffy blankets, colors, styles. Ethan literally was asleep in the back room while I'm trying to do this freaking intro. All right. Next up, we have Mirror Energy. Mirror Energy makes all kinds of things that I probably would have needed on my run today. Gel packs, which apparently is what the tiny little zip short thing pocket is for. You just put little gels in there. I bet you could fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gels in that little pocket. Maybe. I don't know how comfortable it would be, but you could definitely fit a few. Strawberry, cashew vanilla mate, cacao almond mate, cashew lemon, blueberry, bergamot. I don't know about that one. They're really good. I'm psyched on them. They're vegan, organic, gluten-free, paleo, the whole nine. And you can go to www.muirenergy.com, and that is MUIR energy.com. They also have like hydration mix and the whole deal. You do custom packs and the whole nine. Ethan, what's our promo code? Out of Bounds? Yes, promo code is Out of Bounds. 15%? Yes, 15%. He's like thumbs upping me in the back room. I don't know why. He doesn't want to talk today. He's shy. 15% off using promo code Out of Bounds on muirenergy.com. Go do it. Save yourself some money on some really, really good gels and performance nutrition items. Lastly, we have to verify our age to get into this one. Dangle Supply is a sponsor of the Out of Bounds podcast. If you know what Dangle is, you are going to be psyched on this one because you can save 15% off on your purchase. Dangle makes the most ridiculous smoking accessories, like apparatuses, in the entire world, in my opinion. They also have some amazing stickers, some amazing hats, mugs, but they also have titanium bongs, pipes, one hitters. Like this shit is crazy. I'm like, it's such a weird sponsor. I mean, it's a perfect sponsor, but it's such a strange sponsor to just be like, yeah, we have a titanium bong. Like if you pick that water pipe up, the Dangle Bong water pipe up, it feels, with water in it, it feels like nothing is in it. Like it feels like it weighs nothing. It is so insane. Yes, they're not cheap, but they are so sick. Like this is something you keep for the rest of your life. Clip it onto your bike for your backpacking trip. Go to www.danglesupply.com and you can use Ding Dong Dangle Bong. That is Ding Dong Dangle Bong, all one word, for 15% off on your purchase at Dangle Supply Co. It's amazing. They're amazing. And actually, like, I gotta say, the hats and accessories make it for me. Like, that stuff is so good. So anyway, lots of ad reads today. I appreciate everybody listening. I appreciate the fact that we made it to episode 200 and 201. If you haven't listened or watched the episodes with Mike Douglas and Christian Pepper, go back and do so. Those are great. Obviously, John Watson crushed. That one was really, really good. And now I have no doubt that Lachy is going to be the same. So here is our episode with Mr. Spin That Up. Thank you very much. So, Lachy, tell people who you are, tell people a little bit about yourself, what you do, the whole bit. Just give me kind of the general synopsis.
Yeah, cool. So my name's Lachy. My actual name's Lachlan. And yeah, I've been in the bike industry for a longer time than I think sometimes. It's coming up to like 13 years now. So it's been quite a while. And just started off as a BMX rat, kind of got my first start at like a nice little shop where I used to live. Shout out to Nash, who still owns a bike shop in Sydney as well. Kind of gave me a bit of a start and just started fixing bikes. Really, like I was at uni and I was like dodging going to uni or college, as you'd call it, to go to work, which sounds like pretty silly, but I just really enjoy working on bikes. Went down the racing rabbit hole for a while and raced like nationals, and then that kind of snowballed and went on to like race some World Cups. Not well at all for downhill, but had a crack. And realized when I was over there, like, hey, like there are people here who are way quicker than me, but their bikes are rubbish and they need work done to them. Yeah. And so the next year after that, I kind of focused on, that was like 3 years of racing, and then like focused on going overseas to help younger riders, which was awesome. And I learned probably the most I learned out of all my wrenching time really was from being overseas. Like if you can fix a bike in the middle of the French Alps when you're missing some proprietary part, like you can fix the bike anywhere.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just continued on at shops the next wee while. Then Sram approached me to run their technical university in Australia. So did that for 5 years. And that was amazing, like just showing mechanics really how to fix Sram stuff, which was cool, and rock shock. And it really taught me like how to teach and how to communicate with people a lot better. Hopefully it seemed like it worked. And then I kind of just wanted to transition on really, like after COVID, I kind of didn't have that option as much of teaching, and wanted to go more down that kind of marketing route. And now I'm in a marketing position, but then I still have the service side. So I started a YouTube the other week to try and get people servicing their stuff at like a real high end level.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the quick 2-minute rundown of Lachy.
That's the general. So talk to me a little bit about teaching people to service their own stuff, because I think you hear people say this a lot, but when you're teaching, it almost improves your own skill as a mechanic. So did you find that was the case with you? Did you feel like what did you take away from all those years at SRAM?
Yeah, I think like it teaches you what you know better in a couple ways. Like you get different opinions on it, which I think is really cool. And I think when you work at a shop yourself, you're pretty insular in that shop, especially if you work at, say, a Trek store or a Specialized shop. You don't really talk to the other stores as much.
Yeah.
And that was something I never really got. So I think that's a big one where you learn a lot more little details from other people in other stores, which is really interesting. But then just the act of teaching something, like, I can, like I did a gear video the other day, like how to tune gears, and it's super easy to just go and do it, but it's hard to articulate that. I think once you figure out how to articulate it, you realize there's little nuances and the small things that you do within that job at that time, and it allows you to kind of teach it. So yeah, I definitely like solidified a lot of stuff in my head. Like I used to tear forks apart all the time overseas, but I never really thought about it. And then when I came back to teach it, I was like, this is actually really like big job. You know what I mean? Like, because someone had just literally told me how to tear them apart from RockShox, I never really thought anything of it. So you kind of value yourself more and yeah, definitely learn what your craft is better, I feel, and fine tune it from teaching.
Yeah. So I guess kind of backtracking a little bit from that, how did you get into servicing bikes? Like what was kind of the reason that you were like, okay, I can be good at this, right? Because I think there's a big gap between people who ride bikes, as you mentioned, a lot of times, and people who are capable mechanics, right? So how do you make that transition?
Like to start with working on bikes, really, like I raced downhill, so I would break stuff. So I like kind of had to learn how to fix stuff, right? Like there wasn't an option to go to a bike shop every time I busted a derailleur or whatever. And that's kind of what started it. In terms of like working on bikes in a store, like, yeah, I don't really like, I just built up, I was like in year 12. So over here you do year 12 and then you go to like uni. So I was doing year 12. I just finished actually. And I built like a downhill bike during that time. It was kind of like my project for the year. And I think that's kind of when it clicked of like, I could go work in a shop, but I was so not confident with where I was at. Like I just built a bike from scratch pretty much, but I didn't really have any of the finer details or knowledge or even just confirmation that it was working. So that first shop I worked at, which was Renegade Cycles, they kind of gave me that break and allowed me to work on bikes. And that's probably where I realized like, hey, I can do this. I think like the fundamental thing really, like, I don't know if there's necessarily like natural skills that anyone has in mechanics. It's just important to have an attention to detail and, make sure the quality is there, really. Trial and error. Be prepared to fail a lot. Just test ride it and make sure it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked so much is that like mechanics, especially bike mechanics, so many bike mechanics in shops are not formally trained. They're just like, here's a tube, change a tube, right? Like that's how, at least in the shops that I've seen, that's where it starts, right? Is like take tube up or take the wheel off the bike, change a tube. That's your first experience, right? And I think we kind of talked about this a little before we started, where like BMX bikes, right? It's like you have 3 tools, you have a hammer, you have a 6mm, and you have some kind of wrench to get the wheel off because you're going to flat all the time, right? So that's kind of where the skills start. And then if you can make that work, you kind of figure the rest of it out. Like, I mean, in a lot of ways, BMX bikes are very different from higher end mountain bikes or road bikes, but they're not that different at their core.
Yeah. Like I was talking about this the other day with someone, like BMXs aren't, it's just a lot of it's done for you.
Yeah.
So like, I had fly BMXs back in the day, so they run a press fit bottom bracket. Yeah. So press fit's pretty common in mountain bikes and in road, you know what I mean? And it can be done well and it can be done poorly and you can do the same BMX. But like things like chain line and everything in BMX is just set. You don't have to worry about that, you know what I mean? But it's still there. Like if your chain line's out, the thing's going to drop a chain. So like the fundamentals are all still there. It's just that industry is so tight in like the way everything runs that there's not too much margin for error. Like you can't go put some $1,000 jockey wheel upgrade onto your BMX. It's just a BMX with a cog. Like, you know what I mean? So, but yeah.
Have you, what has your experience been like working, like as you're kind of climbing that ladder, working in the service world, what has your experience been like? I don't know, just the progressional experience of being a bike mechanic, right? Because it's a very weird thing to start. Like first you work on your own bike, then you go in a shop, and then you get an offer like, to work at STU. What does that look like for you, right? Like how does that progression work for you as a career path?
I think like first of all, being a mechanic, I can't remember what the name is, but there's this like specific graph of it's like how much you think you know, and then and as the time goes, like how little you actually know, it kind of starts to ramp back up. And I think that's like the knowledge progression with mechanics. I never really thought about it at the time, to be fair. Like, I'm probably just full millennial spec, but it was like, I just want to work on something I love, you know what I mean, and make sure it works. And there's definitely been pitfalls along the way. Like when I was working at shops in Sydney, like that was all good. And then I wanted to go do the overseas thing, and then that didn't really work out, and that took a bit of a blow and kind of takes you back. I think the biggest thing with the progression comes down to, and like I'm only just realizing it now, so it's not me being holier now, but kind of assessing, if you're a mechanic, like trying to assess where you're at every year and see what you're doing. And this, you know, came to me a lot when I was in Sydney. Like, try to figure out what labor you're doing per day. And if you're trying to progress and climb the ladder, like have a financial number that you can go and talk to your store owner about and be like, hey, like this is how much labor I'm doing per day. This is how much I think I'm worth. And that'll kind of help you progress, because realistically, you know, if you stay in a store, you've kind of got like junior mechanic and then head mechanic.
Right. Right.
That's kind of it. You know, if you want to go do the overseas thing, like all the power to you. Like working overseas for World Cup teams and stuff is amazing. But like progression wise with that, like be prepared to work for the first year or two, probably for free, possibly with money out of your pocket, which is gonna not be great. You know, the job that I had with Sram, like I was just super lucky, like right place, right time, right person, hopefully. You know, but those companies like that, like just reach out and network. Like if you are a mechanic, like I'd really suggest going to race weekends and wrenching at, you know, national rounds or whatever. And it's the same in the US. And if there are those brands, they're like Sram or Fox or, you know, any of those brands, like start networking and start talking to people. I think that's the critical part that a lot of people miss. It's like, oh, you know, I wish I knew about that job or blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that stuff's on LinkedIn or whatever. But, you know, if you know that person and they're like, you're right for that job, they'll go and talk to you first. And that's kind of what happened to me, luckily, at Sram, you know. So I definitely network as much as you humanly can, and not in like a lame way. Like do it because you genuinely want to know someone. Don't just do it because,
don't just do it because you want to build your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, go over, grab some beers, grab a beer with them, say thanks, like that kind of stuff. That'll help with that kind of progression. If stuff comes up, you know, there's so much more roles coming up in content and you know, training and it's just going to get bigger and bigger, right? Like everything's leaning more towards consumer than bike shop sometimes. So.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of a good thing to talk about too, is how do you think that's going to impact the service side of things as we go forward, right? You're starting to see a lot of the major brands, being Giant, Specialized, Trek, all have some kind of direct-to-consumer option now, right? Where it's not a true direct-to-consumer. It's you ship to the retailer, they build it for you, and then they go from there. But I think it's inevitable that we start to see a direct-to-consumer option from a lot of these brands. So how do you feel about that? How do you think that's going to impact the need for service in shops?
I personally, I love it. Like a lot of shops are apprehensive, and look, I get it, right? You build up a business based around another business that's now like, we're going to go sell to your customers directly. Like I kind of get the, you know, the hate towards that, but for me, like it's still a bike to be serviced at the end of the day. And I think that's the way that it should really be looked at. Like if you go buy a Canyon online, that person's still got to go to a shop. They're going to go to the shop that's nice to them, as opposed to the ones like, hey, you bought a Canyon, you know. And I think it's just such a narrow mindset to think that stuff's bad. I think if anything, you know, bikes are getting more and more high tech, and people going direct to consumer, they'll probably start to realize the value of bike mechanics more. May take a little bit, but you know, you get your whatever bike out of the box, and the brake needs a bleed, or the headset's loose on an aero road bike. Like you have to go to a shop nowadays. You can't just wing that stuff. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing at all. It's just framing it correctly. My old employer, Ant-Man in Sydney, like he changed all his SEO at the time to be like Canyon Service Center, and we service Canyons, and we got a lot of Canyon people in there, and like we got some really loyal customers who were Canyon riders. Like if we were to take the approach of like direct to consumer is bad, we wouldn't have had that, and that would be service dollars, not the till. So I think, you know, from a service side, just focus on the service dollar. It doesn't matter where the bike came from. They could have bought it secondhand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
no one's got the same like hate towards secondhand. Like
Yeah, that's true. It's weird. I don't necessarily understand where it comes from either, because we kind of have the same mindset where it's like, all right, you bought a bike from us, cool, but in my mind, I would almost rather someone buy the bike somewhere else and we get the service, right? The margin's higher. You build a
Yeah.
loyal relationship with the person. Then if they want to buy a bike from you, cool. Like, the problem with bikes is, and I think people know this, is like bike margins are very slim. Like, they're similar to car
Mm,
margins where it's like, yeah, you have to put a lot of money out there to make money, right? Like, if you're just
yeah.
buying a few bikes, you're not making very much money because the cost equation doesn't make very much sense. Versus parts and service, you have the opportunity to actually make that money. So that's where I think there's a disconnect between like that old school shop mentality where it's like you buy from your local bike shop and you only
Mm.
buy from your local bike shop and you don't look anywhere else. I think that's kind of broken, and I don't know why people aren't as receptive to it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Like the way I see the future going really is, and Trek's kind of spearheading this is you're going to have, it's going to be like the car industry, right? Like you're going to go have your Trek shops or like, there's car places across the road from where I live, like your Nissan stores or whatever. And then you're going to have like your not boutique, but like, your standalone mechanics. And I think that's how it's kind of going to go in the bike industry. It's going to be the big brands, and then there's going to be the smaller boutique kind of shops. And I think at the end of the day, those smaller ones that focus on workshop are probably going to have a healthier, more consistent cash flow than bike sales themselves.
Mm.
You're not going to have the good mechanics at a lot of those concept stores because there is a system and rigid constraints and all that kind of stuff. And I that's kind of how I see it going, a lot like the car industry.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't see any reason why people would be so hurt about that. Like, I get that like the model has been there for long enough where people
Mm.
are committed to that model. And obviously you create a system. It's very hard to change systems as a whole, whether it's in service and sales or anything. Or, I mean, even if like workflow, right? Like somebody changes your workflow, you're completely thrown off, especially like
Yeah.
for me as a mechanic. Like if somebody changes, like pulls me off and I have to go like on the floor, I'm like, fuck everything. Like, I don't want to do this. This is terrible. Like, I don't want to talk to somebody. I'm trying to like do something that's annoying me already. Like, it's
Yeah.
very, it's the same idea, right? You're throwing the system off, and I get that part of it, but I guess I hope to see people start to realize that more and more. But I don't think COVID helped that. I think it hurt it for a lot of
Yeah.
shops, right? Like, I think COVID put this mindset in people's heads that, oh, everybody's always going to buy a bunch more bikes now. And I don't think that's the case at all.
No, like I was just reading a thing about inflation this morning and like
Yeah.
interest rates and like, that's scary in itself. And then I think the best part of COVID and people who are going to hate me saying this was the lack of supply. Like the demand was at this all time high, but the supply was coming through drips and drabs. So there was a scarcity, right? Everyone's like, I need to get it when it's there. And I
Mm,
think if that stock was there to start with, then, the market would have been flooded and that would have just happened earlier. But as the supply comes back now, that's what's going to happen. The demand's lowering because the supply's there.
yeah.
Like COVID was crazy with bikes, man. Like I just can't believe it. Like of all of the options that went through my head when that hit, the last thing I was thinking was like bikes are going to get real popular.
Same. I was like worried that like we're gonna close down shop. Like it's not like, I don't know. It was a very different for the like 3 weeks where everything was kind of shut down. I was like, fuck,
Yeah,
we have a lot of inventory on the floor. Like this sitting here is not good. Like this is bad. And then 3 weeks later, you're like, oh, everybody's basically just throwing their credit card through the door at you. Like they're like,
yeah, yeah.
they're like, and you're returning any bike. They don't even care what they get anymore. It's insane. And now we're at this point where I use this. I just talked to John Watson a little while ago, and I would kind of use the same example where it's like Santa Cruz raised prices 7% 2 weeks ago. It's been 14% or something like that over the last 6 months. You're starting to see this crazy inflation in bikes and in parts where it's going to deter people now from buying bikes, or they've already bought something else with their money, right?
Yeah, like I think now everything's opened up. The bike was this perfect tool to isolate from other people, but the world's kind of opening back up to all the other sports. You know what I mean? Like a lot of those people were into other sports before, whether it be soccer
Right.
or football or whatever. And I think a lot of people start going back to those as well. You know what I mean? Not all of them. I hope a lot of them stay in bikes,
For
but
sure.
you are going to have those percentages going back. You know what I mean? And that means more secondhand bikes on sale, which will lower the price of those. Like secondhand bikes were selling for like nearly as much as
So crazy.
new bikes.
Yeah.
Like, you see, I saw a tarmac on like Facebook Marketplace for like 20 grand the other day, and it was used. And I was like, who's spending 20 grand on a used bike? But that'll just start to all change, a fair bit. And yeah, like I was the same when COVID hit. I was like, I had this dream job at Sram, and I was like, that's it, I'm gone. Like, I always had this like imposter syndrome, and I was like, I'm gonna get fired. This bit, and like they were so good with that stuff. Like it was amazing. But yeah, those first couple months, like, ooh, let's see where this goes, and then it obviously just went crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very weird position for anybody that's inside the bike industry to be in, because it's like now everybody wanted to be a part of this club and everybody wanted to be involved in this very niche sport. But I think in a lot of ways it normalized cycling worldwide for people, right? Like people understand that you're hearing less of that, like, oh, that bike costs $2,000, like $2,000 for a bike. I used to hear it every day. It was like, I can buy a motorcycle. I can buy a motorcycle for that. Yeah. I can buy a dirt bike for that. Like, does it have a motor?
Yeah.
And like, you don't hear that nearly as much now. People understand it happened every day. It was somebody just walking in. We have a pizza shop next to us. So like come in from the pizza shop, just looking around. It's like $4,000. And in my head, I'm like, $4,000 is not that big of a deal. It's like, it's a mid-level bicycle,
Yeah.
It's
that's so funny. I literally worked next to pizza shop as well. Yeah, the same thing. Like Thursday night was like late night shopping, and same thing. It's like, I didn't even get a motor for that. I love that you can go around the world.
Yeah. It's the same. That kind of shit is the same no matter where you are. I promise. That's like the universal, like that's everybody's comparison. And now, they're kind of right. You can buy an e-bike and it's essentially a motorbike, and that's kind of grown the sport as well.
Well, e-bikes are sick. And I have a big theory with e-bikes, right? Because e-bike customers love spending cash, right?
Right.
But like the entry level, like an entry level bike, let's say like a cheap Kmart bike or like a Walmart bike is like over here, it's like 150, 200 bucks.
Right.
Maybe let's say an entry level Trek or something's like $500. Then you go look at like a 14 grand Trek / with flight attendant or whatever it is. You're like, oh, that's crazy. That's like 28 times the price of that bike.
Yeah.
With e-bikes, an entry-level e-bike over here at least is like $6 grand. And then a top of the line's like 22 grand, 24 grand. It's not that much more as a percentage. Like it's not 28 times more expensive.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that e-bike's perfect. It's like that entry into the market is super expensive. So the expectations are actually way higher.
Yeah.
And it's probably also because it does have a motor in it. They're like, oh, I'm getting value.
Yeah.
But it's pretty funny. Like e-bike customers are rad, like so rad.
Do you have the same? We get a lot of, especially near us in the like Western Massachusetts scene. You get a lot of the homemade e-bikes, like a lot of the gas powered, or like they bought a motor on Amazon and they hooked it up to their 20-year-old Huffy or Diamondback, or like we get tons of that shit. Do you like, is that a thing that you see over there?
Nah, not really. Like, okay, well, the area I live in is not like the nicest area in the world. Like there's a lot of just like youths rolling around on like, 2-stroke lawnmower engines on their bikes just to get around, but they don't go like ride trails. They just like wreak havoc on the streets and write their name on stuff with Posca pens. But not really. Like I've seen in the city, you get a bit more of that. Like you get like flat bar conversions, like e-bike kind of stuff. But not really like that. Like
it's crazy. Yeah, we get it. Like it's every other call. I mean, and I'm not in the shop all that much anymore, but it's very funny to get that call. Like every other phone call about e-bikes is like, hey, do you service e-bikes? What kind of e-bike is it, right? You ask that question. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, I bought a motor, I built it myself. Like it's that kind of stuff. It's insane. And you're just like, I don't want to be a dick. Like I don't want to turn away service by the same token that we just talked about. But I also don't want to spend 2 hours changing your tube because you have everything rigged up like an explosive almost, like it's so literally. I'll take a picture and I'll send one to you the next time that I see one, because they're so crazy to look at. So,
dude, we when I was in Sydney, you'd get a little bit here and there of that stuff, like before e-bikes were like a thing. But like I hate turning away work, but I'd pretty much like flat out refuse them in the end, because they just have a like you know what I mean? Like if I and I got good at saying no as well, which I think is a good skill as a mechanic. But it's just like, if I worked on a Bosch bike and like I took the battery out wrong and I crimped a cable, I can replace that Bosch wiring kit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I can call up Bosch and be like, hey, if I've got, Ding Wow Industries or whatever it is set up on a bike, I can't call them up to get the spare parts. So I'm screwed. So that's kind of how to explain it to people. It's like, hey, like if this isn't a brand that we deal with, like I can't work on it because if I fuck up, I can't fix it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds so scary. That literally sounds like bombs driving around.
Oh, they basically are there. You'll see them on like the highways and like the throughways and shit like that, just pulled over, the bike's upside down. They're like smashing it with whatever was in their pack. It's just like, it's so crazy to me that this exists, but it's at the same token, give them a lot of props because they're making it work with what they got. Like they're running what they brung,
Yeah, give that guy a job, man. He's probably going to be pretty good at fixing bikes. They can rig that
all
up.
Right, fucking relax. All right, let's not go that far. Maybe, but I mean, who knows? It's it's very interesting. Anyway, back to like actual mechanicking and kind of talking about this kind of stuff. Why did you decide that you wanted to start Squishy Bits, start your own YouTube channel? Why did you feel that was a valuable thing to put out into the world?
Yeah, like the Squishy Bits one had been in my head for a while. So like I had this space firstly like to do workshop stuff, and then that didn't really work out with the employer I was at the time. So I kind of had this like space that I wanted to use, which was like the YouTube side, which I'll get into. But like the Squishy Bits one, just from working it when I was at Sram doing Stu, like we did a suspension practical on the last day, and it just blew my mind like how many mechanics just didn't play with their suspension. Like I just assumed all mechanics rode like I do, like all the time, and always want to tinker with stuff, you know what I mean? And like when it comes down to it, like a lot of people are time poor, and when they ride, they don't want to go play with their rebound for half an hour. They just want to go shred trails.
Right.
But I was like, well, if the mechanics aren't doing this, like the customers aren't, 100%, and no one's gonna be touching it if the guys sell them the bikes. Like, oh, you set up and off you go. And even then, like, bikes from the box aren't set up right either way. And like I've seen it at shops all the time. Like someone comes in, oh, my shock's blown up. It's like, nah, they're just the person who sold it to you just didn't change the rebound from all the way open, which was the way it was done from the factory, right? So yeah, it got me thinking a lot. And like I work with suspension with riders all the time at events, and they just wouldn't know the minimum stuff like sag. That's why I did that. Like it's like a stupidly long video on sag. It's like 14 minutes, but it's like, yeah, my fork's diving, or it's this, or usually it's not soft at the top, my arm's getting sore, and you're like, okay, cool, it's probably just you haven't been training enough and your arm's sore. But cool, what sag are you at? Like what's that building, like that foundational step, like what sag are you at? And I reckon like 80% of people have no idea where they're at with it.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you don't know what that is, like how do I know what's going to be happening with your suspension? Like if your sag's too high and you're at 10% and the fork's too harsh, cool, let's drop the pressure. Right. If it's too, you got too much sag and the thing's bottoming out, let's add pressure. Like it's just a place to kind of start. So with the Squishy Bit thing, I was like, well, you've spent like $4 or $5 grand on all your suspension. Like if you buy the top level rock shop stuff, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And then you set it up once and then that's it. And like, maybe it is perfect. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't perfect. Like, so I kind of set it up in a way that it's like, it's not me telling people like, hey, this is how you run your suspension, because I have no idea how that person's going to ride on the bike. Like suspension's this crazy dynamic thing that, at the end of the day, I could weigh the exact same as you and be the exact same height, but our flexibility changes. My flexibility from day to day changes enough, let alone, between two different people. So the way that dynamic body weight's going to be moving on the bike is so different. So I was like, well, what if I do something similar really to the Stu idea, but go a bit deeper with it and go do suspension coaching? So like I haven't done a session with it yet. I've got 2 guys that will be doing it with this weekend, which will be the first one. But there's kind of 3 courses, I suppose you want to call it, or menu items for it. The first one's just, to explore your suspension, and they'll be done as like a group session. So cool, we'll go to a track, we'll do 2 laps for you to learn that track, just something short and sweet, like 20 seconds. And once you're used to it, then we're going to go back and set your sag. And you're going to set that at 25 to 30% if it's not right, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the time it's not. Do another lap, come back up. How did that feel? Yeah, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Cool. Now we're going to put our rebound all the way quick. and we're going to take it easy, but we're going to go try it. You know what I mean? Because there's pros and cons for everything, right? Like fast rebound is, it's good in the sense that you get back into your travel, but it's bad in the sense that you're riding a giant pogo stick. So then come back up, let's do the opposite. Let's go slow, you know? And again, low bottom bracket height's a massive part or a benefit of slower rebound. Like you have this consistent planted feel and off you go. But that's not going to be ideal because you're going to pack down, suspension's harsh. Cool, we'll come back up and then we'll start to dial that in a bit more and kind of go from there. And that'd be the first session, which is done as a group, which is, you know, really similar to what I was doing with Stu. And then the next one from there is just dialing it in for a specific track. And we can do it in two ways. It's comfort or it's going to be off speed. The speed will be based off a timing system. So free lap, where we'll have splits, and that's for the racer, right? So, you know, there's a tangible number. This was quicker, this wasn't. And you can also make notes on that of like, hey, this was good, it was quick, but, you know, I can't hang on to this for a whole weekend because the thing's so stiff that, you know, my arm's going to blow up. And then the comfort one is, you know, for most people who I feel do enduro or any of that stuff, just making sure the bike's comfortable, really. Like if you're going to spend all day on it, it's got to be comfy. So kind of dive a bit more from that first session into that and just bracket a bit more in a few settings and see what works and play with tokens and all of that jazz as well. So it's more to empower people to understand their suspension and for them to make their own adjustments, as opposed to me being like, I'm this suspension guru, which I'm not, and being like, you need to run your stuff this way. Because like, you know, everyone rides their bike so differently. Like no one can really know that, you know, especially, like the flexibility thing is a big one I'll hone on about, but that just changes so much. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And then, you know, the YouTube, like, dude, like my Instagram's down at the moment and I really hope to get it back. It's like,
I feel bad laughing, but like everybody's getting their Instagram hacked lately. It's crazy.
Dude, it's like, I'm so good with that stuff though. Like I don't click on links. Like I'm just, the only thing I didn't have set up was like the 2-factor thing. You know, I don't go creep on people online. Like I just use it for buying shit. And I was like, no. But dude, the amount of questions I get on there is massive. And like there's some days I love it and there's some days I'm just like, just go to a bike shop. You know what I mean? Like, especially if the person's like not pleasant. But for the most part, people are good. You know what I mean? Like I had a bit of a rant like 6 months ago and I was like, guys, like just some pleases and thank yous and go a long way.
Yeah.
But like I would say like 2 to 3 questions a day on tech stuff.
Really?
Yeah. And they normally revolve around the same 3 topics. It's Eagle drivetrain, brakes, or suspension.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, why don't I just make a channel for this? And then they live online and I can just send people to those, you know? And at the moment, there's 2 pretty long ones on there, like way longer than I thought they were going to be. But I'll do some shorter ones. Like I want to do some brake ones and stuff I'd done on Instagram before. Like I'd made some real short little snippets for like piston massages and stuff, just do a bit more of an in-depth. But the big thing I want to focus on with the YouTube, and that's why they're so long, is the why. I think that's what's really missing. And that's what I found was great with Stu, but it's missing from everything that's consumer facing now with the brands is no one explains why you set it up that way.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, this is the way you set it up. Now, if you've worked on Shimano for your whole life, like a lot of shops have, you don't really need the why as much because you're just used to it. But SRAM is not, you know, in mountain bike it is now, it's, you know, it's pretty close to 50-50, but it's still a different brand. People still don't really understand the fundamentals of it. So I really want to explain that to people and, you know, just get them thinking like, hey, I do have to set this up differently and this is why I have to set it up differently. And this is the outcome, which is the gears work, you know, and off you go. But, you know, it's like with that video for the gear tune, like I had a guy comment back on my Instagram. He was like, how do I do the gear, the B gap without putting the shock at sag? And I was like, well, if you watch the video, you'd be like, that's the way you have to do it.
Yeah, right. There's not an option. Yeah.
No, you know what I mean? So yeah, like I just want people to be able to work on their own stuff. Like I think some people have really good shops and they go to their shops, and then a lot of people have mixed experiences. And then a lot of people I probably cater to and talk to, you know, probably don't have the cash to go to shops all the time as well. Like they're racers and
for sure,
you know, a lot of my friends live in vans and stuff, you know what I mean? So kind of empowering people to be like, hey, there's no black magic going on in this or crazy voodoo. Like it's just a part. There is a specific outcome that you want, but it needs to be fixed in this way. And this is why. And off you go.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. I think empowering people to work on their bikes is rad. And I think just trying to demystify it all, I think, is good for the industry. Like, and
For
some mechanics
sure.
may kick their feet around and, and not that anyone said this, but I could imagine someone's like, you're just showing them how we do it. It's like, yeah, but if they're not tool savvy or they don't have the tools, they'll probably realize pretty quick they need to go to a shop with how detailed it is. That Eagle video was like 16 minutes on three, not even how to tune your gears, just 3 tips on how to get your Eagle set up right. Like if your attention span doesn't last that long, you should probably go to a shop. If you go and look up the Abbey tool derailleur hanger tool that I use, and you're like, I don't want to spend $500 on that tool, you should probably go to a shop. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, behind magicians, those magician shows where they like uncloak the trick.
Yeah.
It's just more like, it's kind of showing the value and really the high end detail of the bike. But ultimately, I want more people working on their bikes, and I want more people to be stoked. I think when I was at SRAM, I've been on SRAM for a long time. Like before I worked at SRAM, my team was helped out by SRAM, and that's kind of where that SRAM relationship started. And I have a lot of time. Like I'll always be a SRAMmy, and unapologetically so. But I know the products work really well. I just hate it when shops blame the product and when it's not. Like there can be problems with the product for sure, don't get me wrong. But like for the most part, it's usually just set up. And I just want to counter that is probably the biggest goal. These products work well. They should be confidence inspiring. So if your shop's not doing the right thing, maybe check the stuff I'm showing you. And then if it's not, maybe go down another avenue. But
yeah, no, I agree. I agree with pretty much everything you just said. And I think it's one of the biggest things that we do in the cycling industry is we kind of make all this smoke and mirrors shit out of nothing, like for no reason. Right. And I think the thing that you said, you've never really heard anyone say, like I've heard people say, I don't want to teach them what we do because then I'm not going to have a job. But like at the same time, I know 10 shops in the area that need mechanics. Right. Like, dude. That's our own fault. That's shop's fault for not being proprietors of this industry. Right. Like, and not pushing that envelope and not pushing people to have jobs like this. Right. Because it's hard to find, especially if you're not in an area that's like with tons of population. Like you're not in New York City, you're not in Brooklyn, you're not out west in a mountain town. Like it's really hard to find a place that actually has a plethora of mechanics that are capable. And I think offering something that can be like, all right, this is how you work on your bike is great. My counterpoint, I guess, for this is, do you think that suspension, and this is about suspension specifically, has gotten too complex for the user on the day-to-day?
Nah.
You don't think
so?
I
reckon it's gotten easier. Like
there's so many settings though, I guess that's and I understand, I love it. Like I am very into it, but I'm into it, right? As are you.
Yeah.
I just wonder for the average consumer, are we asking too much of them, I guess is my question.
Yeah. Like I think if yes and no, right? Some stuff is and some stuff isn't. Like, and I won't speak for Fox too much because there is a lot of dials on Fox and you could get lost in that, but their manuals are really good. You know what I mean? Like in terms of that stock setup. So that definitely helps. I like, if it's a customer, it's a funny one, man. Like, yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways. And I also think it's gotten easier, and it's because I'm on both sides of the fence. Right. I'm taking a Switzerland answer, but like, I think the consumers want high speed, low speed. I don't think customers know even what a lot of people know what high speed, low speed actually is, but they want the things. If you think about like a charger unit, they still do the RCT3, which I think that's a really good product for someone who doesn't really know suspension.
Right.
So you've got your low speed compression dial, which is going to fix up things like your brake dive and all that kind of stuff. And then you got your thresholds for pedaling. Now, I think it's important the shop educates the consumer on that, which I don't think shops do necessarily. It's just like, hey, this is a lockout, which it's not. It's a threshold, so that's why it doesn't lock out. That's why the customer comes back 6 months later saying my fork doesn't lock out anymore when it's doing the same job they did before. And then you've got the RC2. And like, when you think about it, when I think about it more, like it is complicated, the RC2. But then there's not a huge amount of clicks, which I think is good. I think reducing the number of clicks, and Olin's did it a few years ago as well, I think is good. I kind of agree with you, man. Like, if you get a bike, honestly, if you get a bike direct to consumer and you don't have someone to educate you on it, it probably is too complicated unless you know what you're doing already.
Right.
If you think you're a newbie and you go buy a Canyon and it's got a pike and a super deluxe on it, and you don't really you kind of understand rebound, but you have no idea what compression is, it probably is too hard, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's where I think shops need to, educate consumers on it. But they used to be more complicated. Did you ever work on the old boxes?
They used to be, they used to be stupider for sure. Suspension used to be much harder to work. Now service is easy to do. It's much more streamlined. There's manuals. You can figure stuff out now, and it's somewhat intuitive, right? The old stuff was not.
No, but even service side, the old Boxer had high speed, low speed, rebound, and compression.
Yeah, right.
Same as Fox, right? And people just get so lost in that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So lost. But I would say it's kind of, I'm on the fence. It is complicated and it isn't. But I think if the brands are better, maybe even the brands need to be better at explaining it. You know what I mean? I think that would help a lot. You open up your new Zeb or whatever, and there's a QR code, and they run you through what everything means. I think that would be really helpful.
I agree.
It doesn't mean everyone's going to watch it. Maybe 50% of people will actually read a manual, but that rebirth or the Phoenix that is the QR code is maybe going to help that a bit more. I don't know, but suspension is complicated, and then it's kind of not. And that's kind of where I want Squishy Bits. Squishy Bits is to be hey, it's actually not that complicated.
Yeah.
But you need to kind of understand the fundamentals first. Yeah.
No, I really like that. That's kind of part of the reason I wanted to have you on, was because I was okay, I like where this is headed. I like the idea of this, because it kind of, again, demystifies a lot of the things that maybe people don't understand. I guess I always try to explain these things to customers, and it just always feels 50% of the time, maybe even more, people are just okay, I just want to ride my bike. Just set it up so I just can ride my bike, right? And I guess that's that's where I ask that question of, is it too complex? Because a lot of times people they need that explanation. They just don't want it initially, right? They want to set it and forget it answer, and they want there's one answer, there's a one bike quiver for everything, basically. And there's it doesn't really exist, right? But that is the fault of the companies too, because so many companies use that this is the bike to do everything. I mean, how many times have you seen that in an ad where it's this is the bike that you can do whatever you want, right? It's just shops promote it that way, companies promote it that way. I have this image of the Hightower when it came out, blasted into my head, because that was the solution bike for everybody in the world. No matter what trail you rode, you could ride a Hightower and you'd be perfectly capable no matter what it was. There's some, there's a small level of truth to that, but the other side of it is that it doesn't necessarily do everything well. All it does is do everything fine. That's where I guess there's a little bit of dishonesty in the marketing aspect.
Oh, dude, I read it. I was looking at a gravel bike the other day, and it said they do everything bike. And I was this is a gravel bike, man. It's not a
do everything bike. Yeah, take it on the DH course. Let's see if it's a do everything bike.
Yeah, I think the thing, and this is what I saw the most with Stu, right, is the first day for Stu was suspension day, and it was just death by PowerPoint. You know what I mean? It wasn't the whole day, but the morning was death by PowerPoint, and that was suspension 101. And then we did the practical, which was taking forks apart, which obviously piqued interest. But the light bulb didn't go off until we rode with them. And I think that's where the Squishy Bits is so important. I can explain to you, to the cows come home, how rebound and compression circuits work, and you would understand them already. But if someone who didn't, they're yeah, I kind of get the thing. But for me, I learned by doing and by feeling. And I think a lot of people are the same, especially with mechanical stuff. And I just see the light bulb go off on the Thursday, and people are holy shit, that's how that works. That's what's going on. So I think that's where the Squishy Bits is that missing kind of piece from the store level. And this is where, I was really worried when I put it up, because I still work at a distributor, so I just don't want to piss off our customers. But I don't want to step on shops' toes, locally, because I love the local shops around me. Right. I actually want to help the shops, you know what I mean? It's not it's this big money-making thing. I just want people to ride their bikes better. But it's a missing link that shops don't have time for. We mentioned COVID before. How many spare hours in the day do you have during COVID with the bike shop? Yeah. None, right? The last thing you want to do is go ride with customers. And if I was a shop, I probably wouldn't want to ride with my customers either. You know what I mean? I'd just be nervous the whole time that the gear cable is going to compress and the gears go out a little bit. But for me, like, I'm removed from that. I can go ride with them. I can explain or build on the explanation they've said, but then they physically feel it. And
Right.
that's why, I don't want to be the guy saying, you need to run this setup, because I don't know what setup you need to run. I don't know what you like, because preference is a big thing. Unless it's racing, like the racing side, like I could probably get the setup quicker, but it doesn't mean that's good. But it's that missing piece where they can figure out what they need to do with their suspension. And hopefully it gets some more minds ticking. But yeah, you're always going to have the customer who wants set and forget, and you're always going to have the customer who thinks there's one bike to do everything. But we all know it's not really the case. But if they're happy with that, that's fine. Like, that's probably not my target market. Like, my target market is the person who wants to change things and make things better, or understand things more. The set and forget guys probably aren't that. But maybe they'll come along on one of the group courses and with a mate, and they're like, oh shit, I can change a lot of stuff on this. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I hope so. And I think you're right. In a lot of ways, it's actually getting out there and communicating with your customer. But it's hard. Like, there's a lot of pressure on shops as it is. There's so many things you have to do to make money. Like we talked about earlier, the margins are low. You're working with a limited bag and limited funding. And a lot of times, if you're not a big time shop, where you can make these kind of things happen. So I actually think that you're offering a service to all of these shops because it's accessible on the internet. This is a thing that people should be including in their mailings, right? Like, you don't know how to service your suspension. Here's someone who is a professional showing you how to do it. It's easy access, and it's a tool that everybody should be like, I don't need to go film a video now because you just fucking did it for me, right? Like, I don't need to go do this because you're doing it, and I'm helping you because you're getting the following, and you're getting and people are kind of like gravitating towards you. And you're helping me because I'm explaining to the demographic that this is how it's done, right? And you're giving them the tools to kind of be successful going forward.
Yeah. Like, I think, it's backtrack a little bit to like your comment with shops and mechanics not wanting to teach other mechanics. Like, I'm the opposite of that.
For sure.
I want everyone to do better. I want everyone to learn more. And it's because I was in the same boat with some people I've worked with where they don't want to teach you stuff. And I'm like, this is stupid. Let's make the industry better and let's get more people stoked. And that's kind of the goal, really. Like, yeah, as I said, it's not really like a financial thing. Like, I ain't retiring early from any of this stuff. I just really love bikes, and I want people to get stoked like I am on them. You know what I mean? And hopefully it starts to work. And if more shops can use that stuff, like, even better. You know what I mean? So it's the same with that free like suspension screenshot thing I made today. I was like, I just write stuff down in my notes, and I was like, well, I don't make this a bit prettier. Yeah. And I had 3 guys from teams I know reach out and be like, hey, can I use this? And I was like, yeah, like, I'll make you one for your team, and like chuck your team logos on it. Like, it was getting a lot further than I thought, which was cool.
Yeah. No, I think you're going to find in the coming months, like, there's going to be more and more interest, especially from those people who committed to nicer bikes. Like, they kind of bought that tier 2 where they got into it a few years ago, and now they bought their tier 2 bike last year. Those people are going to be the ones that start asking those questions and start seeking that information. So I think you'll start to see that build more and more and more as we kind of go through, especially going through the summer. Like, I don't know, I feel like every year mountain biking gets a little cooler. Like, it gets more fun for people. Like, I think it becomes more mainstream, right? You got all the things that go on that kind of contribute. You got Red Bull Formation, Red Bull Rampage, all the events that kind of make people think bike, but in a bigger scale. It's really important for the culture of bikes overall. So I think in turn, you're going to start to see that kind of trickle down effect to now people care about how their stuff is set up. So, I mean, maybe coming full circle, this will actually be, people may not buy as many bikes right now, but they're going to care about how their bikes are set up and what gear they run. Right. And I think there's another good point to be made too, about the way that you're framing it and how you're explaining it is really good. Like, I think Fox has done a good job with the Dialed series, because
dude, I love that series.
It's so good, right? Because it's not necessarily about suspension, right? It is, but it isn't, right? It's a series about racing. It's a series about like their team and all that stuff. But if you watch Jordy go through like the differences in suspension, how he talks to them about their suspension, you'll learn a shit ton just listening to him talk, right? And you pick up on those things as you go forward versus somebody just telling you, hey, set your suspension this way, right?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Like I learned a shitload from Geordie originally. Sorry, just one sec.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I learned like a shitload from Geordie originally racing myself. Like he helped out a lot, and he does explain things so well. Like I remember him explaining to me like what a check valve was in like Valdesol car park, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. This makes heaps of sense why the shock's making this stupid noise. You know, Dialed is such a good series because it doesn't really go into like all these crazy custom shock tunes and everything. It just goes through adjusting the clickers, which is the majority of adjustments on a bike or pressure. You know what I mean? I think people have in their head that's like, I've got to go get a custom shock tune. And it goes back to my point in events. Like, if you don't know your sag, you probably don't need a custom shock tune. You know, like, you know, if you're not at an extreme of your dials, you know, you probably don't need a custom shock tune. Like, there's so much to it. But yeah, that dialed series is awesome. Like, and I'd love to see RockShox do, not to rip that off at all, but you know, something potentially.
Who cares? Rip it, 100%. It's the internet. You can rip anything you want. Do you know how many pages on Instagram are just like they just copy and paste posts over and over again so that they gain a following? I'm not saying do that, but like the format's there, right? Like use the format.
Yeah, like they did such a good job, and I think, you know, I really hope that's going to start empowering people in itself. You know what I mean? Like, hey, this isn't as crazy as what we think. The conversations that Geordie's having with athletes, aside from the like the and the noises, like they're not crazy conversations. Like, you know, it's the same thing I've heard him say. It's like it's more translating what people are saying as opposed to, you know, knowing. But yeah, like that series is rad. Like I've got all the time for it, and like as a devout Shammy, like I feel a bit bad watching it sometimes. But like I knew Geordie for a long time before I worked at Sram, so. Yeah, I don't feel bad.
You're being loyal. That's all it is. It's loyalty. It's very interesting to me, and I hope people I hope more brands start doing this kind of stuff, and I think you're starting to see it. But and even like Park Tool, like with Calvin, it's like that you find a way to connect with people at a simple level, and then you can kind of build from there and get more technical if you want. Like there's something for everybody, right? There's people that like the dialed series, and there's people that like what Calvin does, where he's like, "Hey, Jim, how do my derailleur's not working? What do I?" You know, it's like, it's hilarious, and he's hilarious because
I love those. Yeah,
he turns it on, and it's I saw him at Sea Otter a few weeks ago, and he's like, it's hilarious because you talk to him before, and he's like, calm, he's a regular guy, and then as soon as he turns it on, he's like, he was talking to me with a fucking puppet, and I'm like, this is hilarious that this is how he turns it on, just like that, and it's not like he's like a, I don't know, I can't imagine he was a content creator in his youth. It's just he's picked this up and he's had this, like he just figured it out. So I guess there's stuff for everybody, and I'm really happy that kind of thing exists more and more in cycling now.
Definitely. Like, you know, you're saying mountain bike gets radder and radder every year, and I agree. But like the professionals in mountain biking, like it's not like you watch Drive to Survive, right? And like those people are like over there. Like bike riding professionals aren't like that. Like, you know, not being like check me out, but like I know a few of them, and they're all just rad humans who are just like you and I, you know what I mean? So I think those series as well really help to just show that like, hey, like those guys, like they're quicker than you for sure. Like, but they're not that far away. Like they're just normal people. Right. And I think that's really cool, you know, side product of those event-based ones as well. Like these are normal people, and they're probably having the same problems as you on a track. It's just they're riding a shitload faster, but they're still tweaking things. You know what I mean? Like everything's not perfect all the time. So
the relatability, relatability is kind of a key factor. Like it's much better in cycling than it is in mainstream sports, and same skiing and snowboarding and all this stuff. Like these are real people, real humans that you can interact with, and they're very accessible to you. And I think that part's very, it's very cool. Last thing I'll ask you about, and then I'll let you get out of here. Sram Brakes. I don't. They're not all bad. Okay, I don't think they're all bad. I'm not even gonna say the majority of them, especially in 2022, are good. What level? SRAM levels. What what is there a trick that you have that I haven't figured out to make them fucking stop? Like, and stop. I'm a bigger person. I'm 220. Like I'm heavier and I ride reasonably hard, right? Yeah. I can't buy stopping power with those things.
Mm.
Versus there's other lightweight brake options that I find can give you that same thing. And then I hear people's arguments online. It's like, oh, you get modulation. And I'm like, okay, modulation only means so much if there's no power to actually stop when you need to stop, right? And that's, I guess, I always wonder, is it just me? Is there something that you can do better? And obviously, like, at the very simple level, like bleeds being done correctly and, pads being new and all that stuff. It's just, I wonder if there's like an in-house type of thing that you guys have found that makes those perform better than others.
It's a big question because there's so much that can go into that. Like, I'm assuming the bleed and everything's done. Right. The other important steps, really that piston massage, and obviously making sure both pistons are doing this as opposed to like that old Hayes Soul brake doing this. Like if it's doing that or even close to doing that, you're losing a lot of power. What size rotors are you running on it?
So I have a Blur, so it come right now. So it came with 160s, which I'm going
That's
to
your problem right there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm changing them, but I guess I find it on other bikes too, like bikes that come stock out of the shop where I find this issue with 180s, and I almost find that people have to up their rotor size with those brakes to get the stopping power that they're looking for. And a lot of times I think they just end up on bikes that maybe they don't belong on, right? Like they just end up on like a giant Trance, or they end up on a Trek Fuel. And realistically, like that bike is more suited for a Guide or a G2 or a Code even, and maybe that's part of the reason that they get kind of a bad rap, but I don't know. That's rotor size obviously being an important factor. But.
Yeah. It's it's so hard with like OEM bikes, right? Like, and what levels are they? What in the hierarchy? What model are they?
Yeah, exactly. Like on mine, they're like level ultimate. Like they're the
ultimate.
Dope, they're the dope ones. I mean, they're fucking. And I will say, they're the best levels that I've ever had. But they're still like, I'm coming off of a tall boy with hopes on them. The power is very different, right? I think between, and granted, you're not comparing apples to apples necessarily. It's just that when you ride a bike that's as capable as a lot of those Santa Cruz bikes or a lot of the Revel bikes or any full suspension that's built well and that has a suspension platform that's constantly active, stopping power becomes so much more important, And I think that's where the variability with those confuses me a little bit. And I haven't figured it out yet. And I guess that's why I'm asking, because I always shit on them and I feel bad shitting on them because I'm like, maybe they are good, right? Like maybe it's just me. And I don't know.
Let me grab a set out. I've actually got one somewhere. I think it's here. Like the levels are a funny brake, right? Like they are the XC focus brake. And the focus with them is to cut weight.
Right.
That's it, right? So you ditch a piston, but even like in the lever up here, like they're grossly different to what you get on a G2.
Right.
So these are actually more of an inline design from where the pivot point is here to the plunger. I'll get in the camera. Pivot point plunger. The G2s actually have a little swing link in them. And that swing link is what gives you the modulation. These don't necessarily have that. So like they're kind of like on off. They don't really give you the modulation that a G2 will. So if you've got a 160 rotor, these come stock with organic pad or like semi-organic pads, like the gray ones.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, especially for you, if you are heavier, that organic pad, like off the top will have bite, but once it gets hot, it starts to actually lose a bit of power. So, it's probably like a combo of like, look, that brake's probably not perfectly suited to that bike, in all honesty. A bigger rotor size, like you're looking at an OEM spec where someone's gone down the price list and like 160 rotors are cheaper than 180. Let's go with the 160s. And then, because Europe loves weight on bikes, we need to keep the bike weight down. So we're going to go with the levels, because the levels aren't, drastically cheaper than a G2 or anything like that. The level ultimate, like this one here, it's like carbon blade and titanium bolts and all the fanciness. Yeah. But they kind of are a weird brake. Like the caliper is the same as the road caliper.
Yeah.
Literally the same thing, just for a different mount. And then, you do lose a bit of power in the lever. So there's a couple, like I definitely suggest going bigger rotor size. Like I don't think 161 rotors have a place on any bike anymore, to be completely honest. And that's not being Mr. Judgy, but it's just like,
I agree.
Wheels got bigger. Like 160 were okay when they were 26-inch wheels, and now we have these bigger wheels with more weight because of the tire. There's so much more inertia on them, on the system, that I just don't think 180 should exist except for road. So I'd probably go up to a 180 or even like a 200. Like I love over rotoring the bike because you just get so much more power
It's a
out
good
of your
thought,
brakes.
actually. Yeah.
And there's nothing more confidence inspiring than being able to stop when you want and being able to stop real quickly. Like, if you do have that issue with your brakes and you're not stopping as quickly as you want, like, you're going to come into sections hesitant, right? If you come in with a massive big old rotor that's cooling down, you can stop when you want. Like, you can hit stuff way quicker. So I'd definitely go up in rotor size. I'd definitely check the calipers. The pistons are moving evenly. Could be worth changing to a sintered pad if you're going to change your rotors as well. Like, metallic pads will make more noise off the top, but once you put the heat into them, they will have a better biting power to them. Organic pads, like those power pads, like for me, I don't mind them. I usually run them stock at the start and then change my rotors and pads and go back to sintered. But I weigh like 75 kilos, so I don't know what that is in pounds, but I'm a little man.
Not 200. Yeah.
I'm like average height. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm like 170. I think I'm like 5'9", right? Like right. So that kind of works for me. But yeah, like sintered bigger rotors, especially like those HS2s might be good to try, like the thicker rotors as well, because they'll distribute heat. Even going for like a 160, I don't know if you're on the HS2s now, but the 160 version of that is better than the centerline because they're thicker, so they distribute heat. But yeah, I'd probably ditch the one. Is it 160 front and rear or 160 front?
Well, so it's a new bike. I will say, like, it's a brand new bike. Like, I betted the pads and all that stuff, obviously. But like, it came stock 160 front and rear, and immediately, like, first ride, my critique was like, this bike is fucking amazing, right? Two things to change, right? You get rid of the brake rotor size needs to go up, like it's too small front and rear. And then it runs a Fox Transfer SL, which is the worst dropper post ever made. Like, that only goes up and down. Like, so why only up and down? Like, I don't understand.
Oh, is that real lightweight one?
It's a super light one, but like only all the way up and only all the way down is so annoying. Like, I didn't think it would be annoying. When I read the spec, I was like, it'll be fine. Because you buy a slightly less gunned bike, like a slightly less suspension bike, it doesn't mean that your riding style changed. Like, I switched from a Revel Rascal down to a Blur. That doesn't mean I stopped riding the way I would ride my Rascal. Like, I still want to ride.
No.
I still want to ride the way I ride. And yes, I want it to be more, I want it to be a little lighter. I want it to be, fun. I want it to be faster. I want it to be versatile, but I don't want to stop riding it the way that I ride. And I think that was where I was a little confused about the speccing of the bike. And I think part of the reason might just be weight. It might be cost. It might be availability of parts when that came out, because I mean, that is a COVID release bike or a late COVID release bike. So I don't know. I guess there's a lot of factors that go into it. I was kind of just curious, and I think all of those are valid points.
It could be, it could be all three, for sure. You know what I mean? Like, I think the other thing is like Santa Cruz probably didn't build that bike. And this isn't meant to sound mean, but it sounds kind of mean in my head. Didn't build that bike for you to ride it like your Rascal.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like they build it to be and like with those XC bikes, man, like from the OEM side of stuff I've seen, like weight is like the biggest worry with the European market. Like, the bikes have to be light, which I find stupid because like I'll get that XC bike and then just put like EXO or double down casing tires on because I don't want flats, you know what I mean? Like, just stuff that would just make people, like spit out their coffee.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if riding your Rascals the way you want to ride that bike, like I'd set your brakes up the way you had your Rascal brake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're going to be going similar speeds. You're just going to be going quicker uphill, which, what rotors did you have on that?
180s. But I mean, they weren't running. I wasn't running SRAM. I was running Magura, I think, on that bike. And on my Tallboy, it was Hopes, so it was just
piston,
but 4-piston, more aggressive. Like, so that I guess the reason I bring it up too is because the suspension is a non-issue, right? Like, the suspension works phenomenal, and I don't even really notice a big difference bike to bike in that, right? Obviously, like bigger hit stuff, sure. Rascal better bike, like more suspension, better for that. But on the day to day, there's no difference in my ability to ride my regular local shit on a Blur versus, on a 100 mil, 120 mil bike versus a 130, 140 bike. Like, that's not changing the way that I ride, versus the braking power will affect the way that you're able to ride and your confidence in your ride. So I'm obviously asking a personal question, but I'm asking because I know other people are like in this same boat where they're like, this is how my bike
Yeah.
came up. What do I do to fix it? But I guess rotor size is kind of the answer in a lot of ways.
Yeah, events, I see it all the time, man. And it's the same thing with 160 rotors, all 180s for that matter, at a downer race, and they just burnt out.
Yeah.
You're just like, these brakes suck. And you're like, yeah, because there's no friction going on with these. Like, they're just two polished surfaces, kind of like having a really loose, awkward handshake.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, you know, but yeah, like, you know, I run, my habit's not here because I've lent it to a friend. But, you know, for the most part, even on that, like, I usually run a 220 on a trail bike.
No
like,
shit.
It sounds preposterous, and the weight weenies out there again will be rolling in their graves, but like it means my braking's consistent because I do the same thing. So like I had a trance that I built up pretty much like a blur. Like I got a Sid Lux and a Sid 120 and made it into like, I called it like an Anthem SX,
right?
Because it was like that lower travel trance, like the first 29er that came out.
It was like the 130,
and that
120.
bike, yeah, and that bike was sick, dude. And I put 220 mil rotors, 220 front, 200 rear on that because I was riding the same tracks. I was riding like the little downhill tracks up the road.
Right.
So I was like, there's no point in me. And people are like looking at this thing just like, oh man, you've taken down country to a new level. But, you know, I think suit your brakes to what you ride. And I'd even say in your case, man, like it might even be a case of going to a G2.
Right.
I think you'd get a better performance out of it.
Right.
I'm not a big believer in two piston brakes. Like it does come down to a cost and a weight thing. But you know, they're great on road bikes, like my gravel bike over there, but like four pistons where it's out for mountain bike and heat distribution. Like the caliper's bigger, it's got a bigger pocket, so it allows the heat to escape better as well.
Yeah.
On top of the extra power. So
yeah, and I guess at risk of sounding like a pretentious douchebag, like this is my first OEM bike in probably 10 years. So like it's a thing where I'm dealing with, this is not the build that I chose, right? But that's the relatability factor in a lot of ways where, you know, this is an expensive bike, but a lot of people buy OEM bikes. Like that's most people buy off the rack bikes. They don't build their dream build every day, right? Like that shit's all pretty and like there's a whole YouTube series with a bajillion views that you can fall asleep to real easy at night. Like that's wonderful to watch, but it's not everybody's reality. So I guess it's an important thing for people to kind of hear about. But anyway,
I think that's a good thing that goes back to, you know, to the start is like, that's the difference between direct to consumer and a bike shop.
Right.
As well. You know what I mean? Like a bike shop can help you with that and educate you through that. Like, you know, hey, this bike I bought's not quite right. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's how it came. So like, we can't really change that, but you know, we can change stuff at the start or we can change stuff during. And like, you go for direct to consumer, like you're pretty locked in, but it seems like a lot of them are changing now. Like I saw a job on LinkedIn for the YT mill mechanic in the UK, and it was like building customer bikes and installing the parts that they provide. So I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But,
and a lot of places too are better at that too. Like, I mean, you can buy a bike from backcountry or competitive cycle. Not that I'm suggesting you do this, but you can do that, and they will build a spec based on what's available, right? Like they'll change stuff out for you all day long. And I had no idea that this was even a thing that they offered. So I think as everything kind of progresses and as the industry progresses, people will start to adapt their strategies in terms of, or they should adapt their strategies in business and the way that they offer service and builds and all this stuff, right? Like to me, if I had the ability to, I would change all of the bikes that didn't make sense to my head. Like I would change the parts kits out, right? And do it for the benefit of my customer, because these bikes are not built area to area, right? Like they're not built we have rocky, wet, shitty, rooty like trails. Like, I mean, a lot of the riding is phenomenal in this area, but it's rocky, it's wet, it's rooty. Like that's part of the conditions, right? Every bike is not built off the shelf for that spec, right? And I think that's or for that kind of riding. And I think that's where some changes need to be kind of leaned on at the shop, right? And that conversation with the consumer kind of needs to happen.
And it's the same with suspension, dude. Like suspension is changed for everyone. Like you could be the same height as someone else who weighs 30 kilos less than you or 30 kilos more, right? But your same height, so you're on the same bike, you got to set suspension up. Like it's all that custom little bit. And again, because it's not like a car, like, you know, I'm looking at a car now because it's a car here, but like, you know, the car is the majority of mass. So everything's just set up for the car. And then the person in it is this minor change. On bikes, the person is the main thing. And that's
Right.
where, there is such a spectrum of how those bikes can be set up, because at the end of the day, like, there's this huge range that is really the mass that dictates how the whole thing works. You know what I mean? So
For sure. Awesome. This has been great. Where can people find you on the internet? Where can people find the YouTube channel? Give me the whole bit. Where can people find you on your Instagram if you ever get it back? The whole nine.
So YouTube is, I think it's just Spin That Up on there as well. And then the suspension episodes are under the Squishy Bits name. Squishy Bits is a side business I have, which is based in Victoria and Melbourne. So if you're listening in the States, you probably can't come and see me unless you're going to fly over. And that's that suspension coaching and kind of setup. I wouldn't say tuning, because it's not really tuning. So the suspension episodes are under Squishy Bits. The other ones are just under Spin That Up, but on the same Spin That Up account, just to confuse everyone. It's just to segment stuff. And then currently my Instagram has been hacked and disabled, but my Instagram is Spin That Up, which hopefully will be back at some point, but we will see. I've got a Instagram page for Squishy Bits as well, which has a lot of those free resources, and that's where all the suspension stuff will live, and videos as well, and little things I have for free on there will be on there, like the suspension recording your settings thing, which I implore you, if you want to look at your suspension setup, please screenshot that. I don't even care if you take my logo out, but just write down the changes you make, because it's so easy to get lost, and getting a baseline is like the best thing to do for your suspension. And then hopefully my normal Spin That Up will be back soon. That's like the main one. And then I restarted the one for the bike shop I have in here, which is Spin That Up service course, yesterday, because if my other one doesn't come back, that's probably going to be the one that becomes Spin That Up.
Amazing. I found that a minute ago, by the way. I signed up for a free t-shirt via the link in your bio. So
How much crypto did you buy?
Oh my God. Oh, that's amazing. Awesome. Lachy, thank you.